Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our podcast today. I want to start off by thanking Craft Beer Professionals as our sponsor, ABS Commercial, CO2 Meter, and the folks from Pneumatic Scale, Angelus. Thanks a bunch for sponsoring this. I'm here today. My name's Mark Pattison. I own a company called Buck Creek Distributing, but more importantly, I'm here to talk to you today about something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's really something I live by, and thus the title, Play Without Fear. We're at a time right now in our world, in our industry, where we need mental resilience as entrepreneurs, and this just seems to be really timely right now that we take today, spend an hour to talk about these things and really get to the core of how to be mentally resilient as an entrepreneur. First, I want to start off again, thanks to our sponsors today. Couldn't do this without you guys, so thanks again. A little bit about me uh, as an entrepreneur. Many of you know me as the CEO of Buck Creek Distributing, which is distributes all the craft brewing material for craft breweries. But it really goes a lot deeper than that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my story to start off with, where I've come from, how I've gotten to where I'm at today. As you can all see in the background of this slide are hop vines. And this is one of the hop yards we had uh, over here in Iowa a couple of years ago. We started growing hops, and I'll get further into that. This next slide, talk about being multidimensional. Entrepreneurs, I always talk about, it's really hard as an entrepreneur to explain what you do. Many times people say, what do you do? Well, entrepreneurs do a lot of different things, right? It's all kind of an evolution. So we like starting things, we like building businesses, those types of things. But this is a depiction of a large commercial building I built several years ago, and it actually houses our Buck Creek office currently. This next slide's very interesting. You talk about being an entrepreneur, and one of our first topics today is going to be about confidence and how do we get here, right? I'm gonna move forward to a slide and show you how this all started, right? We had a beer on the market called Patty's Ale that I put together with some folks from Dallas, Texas, probably, I'm guessing 9 or 10 years ago. And I knew nothing about beer, zero, zilch. But so folks called me and said, listen, we got a lot of marketing done for a couple beers. We heard you're pretty good at operations. Can you help us figure it out? Lo and behold, 6 months later, we've got 2 beers on the market. We're in cans. As you can see, I think we're ahead of the game. Kind of wish we still had them, but we had beer in cans before many people did. We felt like things were good, but as any entrepreneur would tell you, your mind keeps going to the next step. So while we were making the beer, I said, "Hey, I have a little bit of farmland. Let's talk about growing hops so we can advertise that it's brewed with our own hops." Thus, the previous slide, we started growing hops all in, knew nothing about it. This is our hop picker that we imported from Germany that we used to harvest our hops. So not only did I learn about beer quickly 9 or 10 years ago, I also learned about growing hops. And Iowa in the Midwest, we're very humid region, so it wasn't an easy thing to grow hops. We learned how to do it effectively, right? And one of the things was the rush of learning how to do it, not just grow them, but once you grow them, you have to have a combine and you've got to be able to pelletize, package, do all those things. So fast forward to today, Buck Creek Distributing. After about 4 years of doing hops solely, we figured out that the market really needed another small, more nimble full-scale distribution company, right? So we have grown. We are now Buck Creek Distributing. We distribute all things craft brewing, from malt to hops to cans to puree, all those things. So that's a little bit about me, right? I went to college. I spent 16 years in the biotech industry, and moved on from that to building real estate development companies, to golf courses, to distributing companies. With that said, I'll digress on me, and I want to get into our talk today. We've covered a lot of the introduction. As I mentioned, I'm just a normal guy, right, guys? I'm a normal person, right? I don't have any knowledge above and beyond everyone else, but what I do have is a lot of life experience. With entrepreneurs, you tend to have that because you've worked in different things. And if you can bring all those things together, sometimes it's a pretty good recipe for building successful businesses. Our first topic today I want to talk about is confidence. Excuse me. Went a little quick here. Are you confident in your daily life? And when Andrew and I got together and talked about me doing this talk, the reason is, guys, I think we really need to talk about this stuff. It's not about products, it's not about the economy, it's not about COVID anymore, but it's really about people. And one of the things we work with so much, my current situation as CEO of a distribution company working in craft breweries, but really this applies to all people, right? All walks of life. And being more empathetic as individuals is a start, but I want to talk about confidence. And are you confident in your daily life? This really isn't about being confident that, you know, for example, one I use all the time is, if I'm an electrician, I've done it for 15, 20 years. I'm confident in it, right? Because that's my expertise. Where we need to be is confident in everything you do. I can tell you that when I entered the craft brewing industry 9 or 10 years ago, I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I knew how to drink beer. I, so I knew that much, but could I brew you a barrel of beer today, even still having a large successful distribution company? Probably not, right? But I know enough, and I'm confident in myself, and I know where to ask those questions. So going back to what Andrew and I talked about in terms of a timely talk, we're seeing a lot of movement amongst brewers and breweries. And, is this what I want to do? Am I confident enough to open my own brewery? All these types of questions right now. So the first thing you have to ask yourself, what's my confidence level? Right? If you don't have confidence in yourself, how do I go about getting it? We talked a little bit within my office recently about coaching and life coaches and how to get coaches. I used to be one that, like, I don't need a life coach, right? I'm confident. But one of the things that I realized in having a coach about a year and a half ago was, we all need to take a little time for ourselves personally, right? We need to sharpen our saw. Goes back to the old adage, right? Two guys are sawing through a log, right? One guy just keeps sawing and sawing and sawing. The other guy takes breaks to sharpen his saw. Who gets through that chunk of wood quicker? You ever think about that? Well, probably more times than not, it's the guy that takes time to sharpen his saw. But another comparative would be, do you change the oil in your car, right? Do you drive 100,000 miles without changing the oil in your car? Probably not. So, moral of the story being, take time for yourself, right? Sharpen your saw, reflect, and figure out, am I confident in what I want to do, and go do it. The next section I want to spend a little time on is the word assumption. As noted here, careful, this is a slippery slope. Have you ever thought about a negative event that happened in your life and looked back and reflected, why did that happen? I've had this happen to myself, and 9 times out of 10, it's because I made an assumption. So just think about that for a minute to yourself. When was a time I made an assumption that had a negative consequence, right? If I want to tie this to the craft brewing industry right now, what we see a lot of are disgruntled brewers, right? Who are behind the scenes. Maybe they're working hard. Maybe they feel like, and this could be you if you're on this call, that I'm doing a lot of work. I'm not getting credit for it, whether it be financially, whether it be, just the old pat on the back, not getting recognized. This is a case where maybe you're assuming something, right? Maybe you're assuming that you're not appreciated. So before we make these assumptions, I think it's important to really communicate, right? Do we have regular communication with our coworkers, with our owners, with, our staff? Everybody communicates so you feel appreciated. But maybe if you're feeling that way right now, like you're unappreciated, maybe it's time to communicate, because maybe you're just making an assumption you're unappreciated. Maybe it's a time to sit down and round table with your folks and, communicate. You may be surprised with what you come up with. I've got some real world examples where people haphazardly left their positions, whether it be as a brewer or a front of house person, before they communicated with the folks within their organization. They made an assumption, right? They assumed they weren't appreciated, or they assumed they weren't going to get the next promotion, or they assumed they weren't going to get some equity. So never make assumptions, right? It'll typically end up in something negative. Communicate so you don't have to assume. The next thing I want to talk about is really our frame of mind. I would have never achieved anything really in life had I not been optimistic, right? We all went through COVID recently, and as a craft brewing industry, especially being fledgling, I mean, there's been craft breweries around forever, but really it's still an immature market, right? A lot of breweries have been in existence for 5 or less years. So really a couple years into this COVID situation, uh, we found ourselves having to shutter doors, depending on what state you're in. It was all different things, right? Well, the only way to get through that was to be optimistic. We had a rather fledgling uh, raw material distribution company at the time, and we were hugely optimistic. I remember one of the things talking to our staff about at the time was really, how do we turn, this negative event, this obstacle into an opportunity? And for us, one of the things we had at the time was really, we were able to be nimble. We're small, we're nimble, right? We're optimistic. And I think when you look in the mirror, and I try to do this, and I get it, everyone, you're not going to be optimistic all the time, but you need to get in a mindset where when I'm not and I'm down and out, how do I flip over? How do I flip the switch? Right? Below the optimism word, you see glass half empty, glass half full. Okay. Think about that to yourself. I mean, let's just take a second and think about it. Am I a glass half empty or I'm a glass half full type of person? Does that make sense to everybody? It makes sense to me. And when we go to work every day, there's one thing that we can rely on, and that's ourselves and our frame of mind. And this is so important. And it's not at work, it's at home. I know sometimes a lot of us have talked, you have to adjust when you go home, right? You've had a horrible day at work. Maybe it was a supply chain issue. Maybe you had to dump a batch of beer, but you have to readjust. When you get home, you've got kids, you've got family, and get that glass half full, right? Positive thinking. Faith and freedom. This isn't the faith that's it's not really regarding religion, but it's faith in something, right? Faith in you. I think if we all didn't have faith in something in our lives, this last few years would have been brutal. We're all shut down during COVID. We we didn't know what was going to happen next, what shoe was going to drop. Are we going to have a brewery? Are we not going to have a brewery? Can we open? Can we not open? What's it going to be? But we needed faith to get through that, right? We needed faith in the greater good, that good things were happening. And I know here in the Midwest where we're based, that paid off, right? We saw very few craft breweries close because we had faith. The second word I really want to focus on and about entrepreneurism is really freedom. Entrepreneurism isn't about money. It's not about things and stuff. It's about freedom. And I think a lot of people are in our industry to be free, to be artistic. We need to not forget that when days are tough. I know that's what I do as an entrepreneur. This path I've chosen, I'm always growing a company, starting a company, starting something new, going after a new market for Buck Creek, whatever it may be. On those tough days, I got to remember, why do I do this? I do this for freedom. And I think a lot of you folks out there are in this industry because of the freedom. You have the ability to create. So when the going gets tough, you're in the trenches. Maybe you don't want to clean that keg, right? Maybe you don't want to go find financing for your next expansion to your next tap room or your brewery. But remember why you're doing this, right? You're doing it for freedom. The next one I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on. This is something we talk about in our staff meetings all the time. And it's how we function at Buck Creek Distributing as a company. It's how I function as an individual. As an entrepreneur, as I mentioned earlier in the talk, you're going to have a lot of people that ask what you do or why'd you do that, or you gave up this incredible career to do this. You're going to hear a lot of that. You need to be unapologetically you. You need to be your own authentic self. Why is this so relevant in the craft brewing industry today? It's something we work with all of our customers on a consulting basis is be yourself. What we see going on, when the industry was newer, we had our first craft breweries. Well, what was kind of great is, if you built it, they would come. That's not the case so much because we have a lot of breweries. So rather than getting down and out about this, how do we be our own authentic self, especially as a brewery? one of the things I joke about a lot is there are more trivia nights going on Tuesdays in the US now more than ever because every other brewery is doing trivia night. And it's all understandable. People, thought of ways to get people in their brewery. But be your own authentic self. I think about similar deal with food trucks right now. I know a lot of people are having food trucks and they're awesome. It offers a variety. But if I'm a craft brewer, is that scalable? Does that stay all the time? Right? We're at a pivot point in the industry where we probably need to work on being our own authentic self. If I look at some of the most successful companies in the world, uh, Elon Musk, any of these folks that have built these humongous successful companies because they were their own authentic self. We can do that in craft brewing, but we need to continue to be our own authentic self. I think many people enter our industry so they can be artistic, so they can be free. We can't lose that. I think what we've seen in the last couple of years, especially since COVID, is that things have become more competitive out there and we're doing whatever we can to survive. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't forget, you want to be your own authentic self, right? So if I want to grow my business, grow my brewery, I need to think outside the box, right? I need to I need to be different than the next guy down the street. The state I live in, we currently have probably 130 breweries, which means, there's 100 trivia nights going on tonight. Just kidding. I love the trivia night thing. I've gone to many. But point being, let's be different, right? Be unapologetically you. Okay. There's some things you have to do, right? Just normal business things that everyone's doing. But how am I different? Right? There's only so many ways we can make a hazy IPA, I think. There's only so many flavors we can do. But really think outside the box. How's my brewery different? How's my tap room different than the guy down the street? Be unapologetically you. Don't feel like you have to be a follower. Be your own authentic self. Legacy. How do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be? And this has nothing really to do with brewing or business or anything. Always use the old adage when people do jobs for money or they build businesses for money. Money gets you things and stuff, right? But it doesn't get your legacy. A joke I always make is no one's going to stand around your casket and talk about how thick your wallet was, right? Just think about that for a minute. No one's going to stand around your casket and think about how thick your wallet was. No, they're going to talk about your legacy, what you did, the times you had with them, the memories, the things you built. A lot of what I've done in life, whether it be real estate development, hasn't always been for money. Some of it's for a legacy. I live in a small town in central Iowa, and we had a main street, this beautiful growing town, right? And we had no main street. We didn't have any commercial buildings to speak of. And several years ago, I stepped out, I took a risk, built a couple large commercial buildings to benefit our community. And sure, money comes with it at times, but really, I want to leave a legacy in the town that's treated me so well, where my kids have raised. And I want them to be able to drive down the street 50 years from now for my grandkids to say grandpa did that. I think it's similar to some of you guys. It's fun about brewing is, am I going to have that next beer that takes off, right? Am I going to be Jim Cook, Sam Adams? That's fun. That's what drives you every day. What's your legacy going to be? So when you're making moves, when you're making business decisions, deciding whether to move on to the next brewery, whatever it may be, whatever role you play, I think it's important to always think about your legacy. We have one life to live, right? And that's important. Real quick, values. Never forget your values on the way up. Entrepreneurism. And when I say entrepreneur, it isn't just for business. You guys are all entrepreneurs, right? If you're in the craft beer industry, don't sacrifice your values for what you want to achieve in life. Always remember your values. Mental resilience. We've talked a lot about this already. I'm not going to continue to talk more, but you got to overcome adversity. We did it with COVID. You all proved you could do it, but be mentally resilient. Community. It takes a village, guys. There's never been a successful brewery, successful anything, business, legacy without community. It takes a village, right? I know one of the things that craft brewing industry does so well, I think, is community, from doing beer festivals. But anytime you can interact and be hand in hand with the folks that are visiting your business, the better, right? So before I open it up for questions and further discussion, I want to talk a little bit about Buck Creek Distributing. Hopefully this will allow you guys to generate some quality questions. Buck Creek Distributing is my entrepreneurial endeavor that, guys, I'm going to tell you, I want to spend 5-10 minutes on growing this company, and not just because I have my slide up there, but really to tell you about all the things we just talked about, right? So as I said 9 years ago, backing all the way up through the slides here, we started, we went through this, we started growing hops, and slide. This took so much mental resilience. Here I am, I jump into growing hops in Iowa, right? There's no hops grown in Iowa. They're all in the Pacific Northwest. Well, okay. They used to be grown in Iowa before Prohibition. I can do this. 1,700 poles later, 40 acres of hops. And guys, there were days where you think, why did I do this? What did I get myself into? The amount of labor involved with growing hops, the amount of equipment needed. We're importing harvesters from Germany, and we need to know how to pellet. Then you get all done, and you have to sell them. So mental resilience it took. And it's all about not quitting. It really is. It's all about not quitting. But one of the things we talked a little bit about being unapologetically you, right? Sometimes you have to turn on a dime. Okay. If what we were doing yesterday doesn't work anymore, we probably need to look at the next thing, right? I need to adjust my marketing. I need to adjust how I'm doing things. Or really, are there unmet needs that complement what we do? In our case, fast forward, to Buck Creek Distributing, we're in a number of breweries selling hops, talking about things. And I asked the question, right? I didn't want to assume, but I asked the question. I mean, backing up, what I assumed is if I grew the hops, they'd buy them, right? Kind of, if you build it, they will come. That's kind of a line of BS. Because really, one of the things I learned through all of this is local's just a word, right? Buy local, do local. We still have to provide value, right? Just because it's local, we have to provide value. But we're in a brewery, and so what else can we do to help you? And I said, oh man, flaked grains. They're a pain in the butt, and I can't buy them by a semi-low quantity. So we did a little research and said, hey, why don't we become a full service distribution company? There's an unmet need out there. Let's do this. That's what we did. And now we've grown exponentially. We have locations in Iowa, Chicago. We have 700 line items in our catalog. But the example is we had to turn on a dime and we had to be flexible. But all these things we just talked about put together, I had the confidence, right, to turn on a dime. I had the confidence to start growing hops, right? I didn't make any assumptions. The negative assumption I made is that if I grew hops, people would buy them, they'd sell off the shelf because we had a really quality hop. We had to charge a little more due to our inputs, but I made that assumption. Well, that assumption may have been wrong, right? So I went back to my confidence that I convert this into a full-scale distribution company, right? Because I had optimism. I was optimistic I could do that. I had faith that I could do that, and I had the freedom to do it. And I wanted to keep that freedom. Of course, I had the people talking about, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? Because I'm unapologetically me. I'm my own authentic self, right? And I know what my legacy is, right? I know what it'll be. I'm confident in that. I'm not a quitter, right? I'm confident. I've started multiple businesses, been successful, right? But I kept my core values being people. Everything I've done in my time as an entrepreneur, whether it be in real estate development, whether it be golf courses, whether it be Buck Creek, where we're at today, my core values people. What's most important to me in my life is my family and my friends, right? My customers. That's my core value is people. People are really, really one of my pillars. And I think you'll find that within your breweries that it's not the taste of your beer always. It's not the price of your beer. It's not the food in the back of the house. It's the people. Think about that for a minute. Have you ever gone to a place for the people? You can overlook a lot of negative things if you love the people, right? Think about that in your breweries, whatever your tie into this industry is, it's all about people. And of course, I had to have a lot of mental resilience. you know, uh, from the day 10 years ago that someone ordered 10 pounds of fresh hops and I literally thought I could just go pick them myself. 5 hours later, right? 5 hours later, you have to be mentally resilient. When the chips are down, you got to be mentally resilient and lean on your community, right? We're all in this elbow to elbow, cheek to cheek, however you want to put it, right? One of the things we tell a lot of the brewers we deal with is we're in this with you. We grow hops, we have barley. We're in this with you. It's It's not a vendor brewer relationship. We're in this with you. If you grow, we grow. If you're successful, we're successful. So, with that being said, visit us at buckcreekdistributing.com. We have everything from cans, malt, hops, yeast, puree, cleaning chemicals. Guys, we're nimble, we're small, and we can get it done. But more importantly, we're here on everything we just talked about, right? We're a consultative business that really wants to help you become a better you. If you get time, we've launched a podcast recently called Play Without Fear. It's available on Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Apple. Play Without Fear. A lot of these same things we're talking about, but we're doing everyone in depth per episode. So the first episode out there is on confidence. I highly, highly urge you to become a follower of Play Without Fear, just to help you, get through this day, this week, this month. And I think it'll really open a lot of avenues and help you sharpen your saw. Okay. Play without fear. It's a motto I live by. And before I end here, I just want to tell you where the name came from. And this is a hugely funny story. It's awesome. So I went to the University of Northern Iowa, and when I graduated, I decided, well, I'm going to move to Chicago, right? Small little farm boy from Northeast Iowa. He's moving to Chicago, and loaded up my car. I had $2,000 to my name, and car's all loaded. It's out in front of our house. And all of a sudden I see a tow truck hooked to it. I'm like, holy shit, what's going on? Well, I learned quickly that you should pay your parking tickets as you get them. Now I got $1,400 to go to Chicago, because once you graduate, they want you to square up on your parking tickets. So, so I'm off to Chicago. I need a job, right? I need a job. So I interviewed with a company called Skyline Exterior Windows and Doors. And it was very Glen Ross. You got 2 leads a night to go sell replacement window siding and doors. And I was trained by these, I guess you could call it, hardened sales guys. They may have a shot of whiskey on the way to a sales call. Maybe not. They may even have some other stuff on the way to a sales call, just to loosen up and build that confidence. So after a whopping 3-day training course, now remember, I'm 22. I'm from a small town in Northeast Iowa. I'm now in downtown Chicago, right? At the end of my training, they gave me a placard to put in my briefcase. So every time I'd open it, I'd see it. And they called it Play Without Fear. Play Without Fear. Since that day, I've lived by that motto. So much I have it tattooed on my forearm, right? I think every day when you go out there, guys, gals, people, you need to think about that. Go win every day by playing without fear. And maybe it's not always playing without fear. Maybe you are fearful. I take that back to one more example. When I was 14 years old, I worked on a construction crew. And the supervisor asked me to get up on the roof. It was 2 or 3 stories. And I said, I don't think I like heights. He said, it's not optional. Get up on the roof. That day I had to face my fear. And heights is something that maybe you can overcome, but needless to say, maybe it's not always playing without fear, but play with your fear, right? But needless to say, play. So everything we just talked about, the legacy, the confidence, the mental resilience, be your own authentic, unique self, that brings you to being able to play without fear. If you can put all these things together, right, you can play without fear. With that said, everybody, I'm going to open it up for questions and group discussions. I appreciate everyone listening. Thanks again to our sponsors. Thanks again to Andrew with Craft Brew Professionals for allowing me to share a little bit of my thoughts and insights today. Again, my name's Mark Pattison, and with that, I'll open it up for questions and group discussion.